20 years of silence was about to be broken by two simple words. Ellen thought she was honoring a teacher, but what happened next stopped everyone in that studio cold. When 8-year-old Jake spoke for the first time, it wasn't just his voice that changed everything, it was the moment that reminded. It was a bright Wednesday morning at Warner Bros. Studios in Burbank, and the Ellen DeGeneres show was buzzing with its usual pre-taping energy. Ellen bounced onto the stage wearing a crisp light blue suit that complemented the show's signature backdrop perfectly. Her comfortable white sneakers squeaked. "Good morning, everybody," Ellen called out, her arms spread wide as she soaked in the enthusiastic applause from the studio audience of 300. "Are you ready for something really special today?" The crowd roared their approval, and Ellen's grin widened. She loved these moments, the anticipation before surprising someone who deserved recognition, the electricity of knowing she was about to change someone's day, maybe even their life. "Today we're doing one of my absolute favorite segments," Ellen continued, walking to center stage with purposeful energy. "We're celebrating teachers, and let me tell you, teachers don't get nearly enough credit for the incredible work they do every single day." The audience applauded appreciatively, many nodding in agreement. Ellen had always been passionate about education, about recognizing the unsung heroes who shaped young minds and changed futures, one student at a time. "Now I want you all to help me welcome someone very special," Ellen announced, pulling out a blue index card. "Susan Mitchell has been a special education teacher for 20 years. 20 years! She works with children who have autism, and according to everyone I've talked to, she's not just good at her job, she's miraculous at it." The spotlight found Susan immediately, sitting in the fourth row. She was a woman in her mid-40s with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and graying brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple navy dress that she'd clearly chosen specially for the show, and when the light hit her, she looked genuinely stunned. "Susan Mitchell, come on down here," Ellen called out enthusiastically. Susan made her way down the aisle slowly, her hand over her heart, clearly overwhelmed by the attention. She'd been nominated by several parents and colleagues, all of whom had written to the show about her extraordinary dedication and the way she connected with children others had given up on. As Susan reached the stage, Ellen met her with one of her signature warm hugs, the kind that immediately put nervous guests at ease. "How are you feeling?" Ellen asked, pulling back to look at Susan's face. Completely overwhelmed, Susan laughed, her voice carrying a slight Southern accent that spoke of her Alabama roots. "I still can't believe I'm actually here." "Well, believe it, because you deserve every bit of recognition you're about to get," Ellen said firmly. "Now, Susan, tell everyone what you do." "I'm a special education teacher at Roosevelt Elementary in Phoenix," Susan replied, her voice growing stronger as she spoke about her passion. "I work primarily with children on the autism spectrum, ages 5 through 10. "And you've been doing this for 20 years. 21 years this fall," Susan nodded. "It's not just my job, it's my calling. These kids, they're incredible. They see the world differently, and they've taught me so much more than I could ever teach them." Ellen smiled at the genuine love in Susan's voice. "I understand you've had some pretty remarkable breakthroughs with your students over the years." "Oh yes," Susan's eyes lit up. "Every child is different. Every victory is unique. Some kids learn to make eye contact for the first time. Others learn to communicate through pictures or sign language. Some learn to regulate their emotions or interact with other children. Every single breakthrough, no matter how small it might seem to others, is monumental." "That must be incredibly rewarding," Ellen said, and she meant it. "What keeps you going when progress is slow?" Susan was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "Love," she said simply. "These children are loved by their families, they deserve to be loved by their teachers, and they have so much love to give back. You just have to be patient enough to receive it in whatever form it comes." The audience was already charmed by Susan's obvious dedication and heart. Ellen could see people leaning forward, engaged by this teacher's passion and wisdom. "Now, Susan, I understand you have one student in particular who's been with you for a very long time." Susan's expression changed subtly, becoming more tender, more personal. "Yes, Jake Thompson. He's 8 years old now, and he's been in my class for 3 years." "Tell us about Jake." "Jake is—" Susan paused, searching for the right words. "Jake is one of the most beautiful souls I've ever encountered. He's incredibly intelligent. You can see it in his eyes, in the way he observes everything around him. He loves music, especially classical music. When I play Beethoven during quiet time, he'll rock gently, and you can see this peace come over his face. He sounds wonderful, Ellen said softly. What makes Jake's case unique? Susan took a deep breath, and Ellen could see emotion building in her eyes. Jake has never spoken. Not once in 8 years of life. His parents have tried everything: speech therapy, different communication devices, sign language. He understands everything you say to him. He follows complex instructions. He shows affection and connection, but he's never used his voice to communicate. The studio was quiet now, hanging on every word. Ellen felt that familiar tug in her chest that came when she encountered stories of extraordinary challenges and the people who faced them with grace. That must be heartbreaking for his family, Ellen said gently. It is, but they're incredible. His mother Carol never gave up hope, never stopped talking to him, reading to him, singing to him. She'd say maybe today will be the day, every single morning for 8 years. And you? Did you believe he might speak someday? Susan nodded firmly. I never stopped believing. There was something in his eyes, something that told me the words were there, waiting. I'd talk to him constantly, ask him questions even though he couldn't answer, tell him about my day, read him stories. I wanted him to know that his voice mattered, even if he never used it. Ellen was impressed by Susan's unwavering faith and dedication. 3 years of working with Jake, and you never gave up. I would never give up on any of my students, Susan said with quiet conviction. But Jake was special. There were moments when I could swear he was about to speak, when he'd open his mouth and take a breath like he was gathering courage, but then nothing would come. That must have been frustrating. Sometimes, Susan admitted. But mostly it just made me more determined. I knew that if Jake ever did speak, it would be because he felt safe enough, loved enough, understood enough to take that enormous leap of faith. Ellen nodded, touched by Susan's patience and insight. And you mentioned in your application that something significant happened recently. Susan's eyes filled with tears, and she brought her hand to her chest. The emotion was so genuine, so immediate, that Ellen felt her own heart rate increase. Yes, Susan whispered, and then she had to stop, overcome by the memory. Take your time, Ellen said gently, recognizing that they were approaching something profound. Susan wiped her eyes and took a steadying breath. Yesterday morning, it was just a regular Tuesday. The kids were having free playtime, and Jake was sitting by himself at the book corner, looking through a picture book about animals. I was working with another student across the room. She paused, reliving the moment. And then I heard something I'd been waiting 3 years to hear. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Ellen leaned forward slightly, sensing that they were about to hear something extraordinary. Jake looked up from his book, looked directly at me across the room and said, Susan's voice broke with emotion. He said, "Teacher." Ellen felt the word hit her like a physical force. He spoke, Susan confirmed, tears flowing freely now. After 8 years of silence, after 3 years of me wondering if I was reaching him at all, he looked at me and called me teacher. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front rows brought their hands to their mouths. Ellen felt tears welling up in her own eyes. Susan, what did you do? I froze. Susan laughed through her tears. I just stood there staring at him, thinking I'd imagined it. But Jake was looking right at me with this little smile, and I knew it was real. I walked over to him very slowly, knelt down and said, "Yes, Jake, I'm your teacher." And you know what he did? What? He reached out and touched my face, just for a second, and then went back to his book like nothing had happened. Ellen was openly crying now, and she could see that half the audience was too. Did he say anything else? Not yet, but I know he will. The dam has broken. His mother cried for an hour when I called her. We've been waiting for this moment for so long. Ellen wiped her eyes and looked at Susan with profound respect. You must feel incredibly proud. I feel grateful, Susan corrected. Grateful that Jake trusted me enough to share his voice. Grateful that I got to be the first person to hear him speak. Grateful for every day I've spent with these amazing children who teach me what patience and love really mean. Ellen was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of what Susan had shared. Then something occurred to her. Susan, is Jake here today? Susan's eyes widened slightly. Yes, he is. His mother brought him. They're sitting right over there. She pointed toward a section of the audience. Ellen's heart started beating faster. Would it be okay if we met Jake? I don't know, Susan said hesitantly. He's not used to crowds, to noise. This environment might be overwhelming for him. We could turn down the lights, keep things very quiet and calm, Ellen suggested. Only if you think he'd be comfortable. Susan looked toward where Jake was sitting with his mother. "Let me ask, Carol." Ellen nodded and gestured to her production team. Within moments, they had dimmed the studio lights and cut the background music. The audience seemed to sense the importance of the moment and settled into respectful silence. A woman in her 30s with kind eyes and brown hair made her way down the aisle, holding the hand of a small boy with dark hair and serious brown eyes. Jake was smaller than Ellen had expected, wearing a blue polo shirt and khaki pants, looking around the studio with curious but cautious eyes. "This is Carol Thompson, Jake's mom," Susan said as they reached the stage. "And this is Jake." Ellen knelt down immediately, bringing herself to Jake's eye level. She'd learned over the years that children, especially children with special needs, responded better when adults made themselves less intimidating. "Hi, Jake," Ellen said softly. "I'm Ellen. Thank you for coming to visit me today." Jake looked at Ellen with those serious brown eyes, taking in her face, her voice, her presence. He didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. "Your teacher Susan told me about you," Ellen continued in the same gentle tone. "She told me you like music." At the mention of music, Jake's eyes brightened slightly. He glanced at Susan, then back at Ellen. "Would you like to sit down with us?" Ellen asked, gesturing to the comfortable chairs on the stage. Carol helped Jake into one of the chairs, positioning herself protectively beside him. Susan sat on his other side, creating a safe triangle around the boy. Ellen remained kneeling, not wanting to tower over Jake. "I heard that you said something very special yesterday." Jake looked at Susan, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, Jake. Ellen is a friend." For several moments, nothing happened. The studio remained in respectful silence, 300 people holding their breath, waiting. Ellen didn't push, didn't demand. She simply waited, letting Jake process the situation at his own pace. Then, so quietly that the microphones barely picked it up, Jake spoke. "Hello, Ellen." The words were clear, deliberate, and absolutely unmistakable. Ellen's hands flew to her mouth, tears immediately streaming down her face. Susan gasped audibly. Carol started crying. The audience erupted in the most genuine emotional applause Ellen had ever heard. But Jake wasn't finished. He looked directly at Ellen, making eye contact that was steady and purposeful. "Thank you," he said, his voice stronger now. "Thank you for what, sweetheart?" Ellen managed to ask through her tears. Jake looked at Susan, then back at Ellen. "Thank you for making teacher happy." The studio erupted again, but this time Ellen held up her hand, asking for quiet. She sensed that Jake had more to say. "I love teacher," Jake continued, each word deliberate and precious. Teacher never gave up. Susan was sobbing now, reaching out to gently touch Jake's hand. "I love you too, Jake. I'm so proud of you." Jake smiled then, the first smile Ellen had seen from him. It transformed his entire face, revealing a joy and intelligence that took her breath away. "Music?" Jake asked, looking at Ellen hopefully. Ellen laughed through her tears. "Would you like to hear some music, Jake?" He nodded enthusiastically, and Ellen gestured to her production team. Moments later, soft classical music began playing through the studio speakers. Jake's face lit up, and he began that gentle rocking motion Susan had described. "Beethoven," Jake said clearly. "I like Beethoven." Ellen looked at this remarkable child, at his devoted mother, at the teacher who had never given up hope, and felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just television anymore. This was a moment of pure human triumph, of love and patience and faith being rewarded in the most beautiful way possible. "Jake," Ellen said softly, "would you like to come visit me again sometime?" Jake looked at her seriously, considering the question. "Will you play music?" "I will always play music for you," Ellen promised. "Then yes," Jake said with that wonderful smile, "I will visit Ellen again." The show ended with Jake sitting peacefully on the stage, listening to Beethoven while Ellen, Susan, and Carol sat nearby, all of them crying happy tears. The audience remained in their seats long after the cameras stopped rolling, as if leaving would somehow diminish the magic of what they had witnessed. In the weeks that followed, Jake's progress accelerated dramatically. Having broken the barrier of silence, he began communicating more and more each day. He started asking questions, expressing preferences, even telling simple jokes. Susan documented every word, every breakthrough, sharing updates with Ellen and the show's audience. Ellen invited Jake and his family back to the show 6 months later. By then, Jake was speaking in full sentences, singing songs, and even asking Ellen questions about her life and her show. The transformation was remarkable, but what hadn't changed was the bond between Jake and Susan, the teacher who had believed in his voice before he even knew he had one. "What do you want to be when you grow up, Jake?" Ellen asked during that return visit. "A teacher," Jake replied without hesitation. "Like Teacher Susan, I want to help kids who can't talk yet." Susan, sitting nearby, wiped away fresh tears. "You already are helping them, Jake, just by showing them that their voices matter, that they're worth waiting for." Ellen looked at Susan with profound admiration. "What did you learn from Jake?" "That every child has something to say," Susan replied. "We just have to be patient enough to listen in whatever language they're speaking. Sometimes that language is words, sometimes it's behavior, sometimes it's silence, but there's always communication happening if we pay attention." Jake's story became one of the most shared and celebrated in the show's history. Not because of any dramatic reveal or expensive surprise, but because it reminded viewers that some victories can't be rushed, some breakthroughs require years of faith, and some of the most important words ever spoken are worth waiting a lifetime to hear. Susan continued teaching, inspired daily by Jake's progress and the reminder that patience and love can move mountains. She kept a photo on her desk of the moment Jake first spoke to Ellen, a reminder that miracles aren't always loud and flashy, sometimes they're quiet, simple words that change everything. Jake thrived in school, his vocabulary and confidence growing daily. He often visited Susan's new students, sitting quietly with them, letting them know through his presence that they too had voices worth hearing, even if the world had to wait to discover them. Ellen kept her promise to Jake, always having music ready whenever he visited. But more importantly, she carried his story with her, as a reminder that some of the most powerful moments in life come not from entertainment or surprise, but from bearing witness to the quiet courage of children who teach us what it really means to never give up. The three words that broke 20 years of silence, "Hello, Ellen," became more than just Jake's first public words. They became a testament to the power of believing in someone when they can't yet believe in themselves, of speaking to silence until silence finally speaks back.